It looks like something scraped off a cafeteria tray. My daughter-in-law, Valerie, spat. She crossed her arms, sneering at the baked ziti on my dining room table, and added with a dismissive smirk, "Seriously? My mother could make this so much better." Silence dropped over the room like a lead weight. My son, Nathan, tensed up in his chair, but true to form, he kept his eyes glued to his phone, pretending he hadn't heard a thing. I took a slow sip of ice water, letting the moment stretch out so her words could echo in every corner of the room, and replied in a very quiet voice, "I didn't cook tonight." Valerie's expression didn't change at first. She kept that haughty look, totally convinced she'd just put me in my place. But then, a soft sniffle broke the tension. Harper, my 12-year-old granddaughter, was staring at her lap, tears streaming down her cheeks. Next to her, 10-year-old Chloe was shrinking into her shoulders like she was trying to turn invisible. The girls had spent almost 2 hours in my kitchen that afternoon. They had carefully chopped the veggies, simmered the sauce, and watched the oven like hawks. So excited to surprise their parents after a long workday. And their mother had just crushed all that effort without even taking a single bite. Valerie went pale as it dawned on her. She looked at the girls, then at me, and finally at her husband. I waited for an apology, a clumsy attempt to do damage control. Instead, she scoffed, pushed the plate away, and muttered that kids shouldn't be playing around in the kitchen anyway. Nathan finally looked up. "Mom, you really shouldn't be putting them to work doing your chores," he said, taking a pathetic swing at defending his wife. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Instead, an absolute, ice-cold clarity settled right into my chest. For years, I had handed over my space, my time, and my money just to keep the peace in this family. That night, as I watched my granddaughters silently clear the table, I knew the peace treaty was officially ripped up. It was time to get my house in order. The next morning, I was up before the sun even hit the street. We lived in a 2-story duplex. I had the bottom floor, and I'd let Nathan and Valerie live in the upstairs apartment ever since they got married. The whole point was for them to save up for a down payment on their own place. But that was 13 years ago. The unspoken agreement was that my door was always open. Every morning, Valerie would waltz downstairs, drop the girls off for me to feed them breakfast, grab a cup of coffee I'd already brewed, and sometimes even dump her dirty laundry in my hamper, claiming her washer was making a funny noise. That morning, I gathered the mugs Valerie had left in my sink the night before. I washed them, dried them, and packed them into a cardboard box. Then, I walked through my living room, rounding up stray shoes, magazines, and phone chargers that didn't belong to me. Everything went right into the box. At 7:30 sharp, I heard heavy footsteps coming down the exterior stairs. I walked over to the front door and slid the deadbolt. A firm, final, metallic click. Seconds later, the doorknob rattled, but the door didn't budge. Then came an impatient knock. "Joanne, open up!" Valerie called out from the porch. "The girls are going to be late for school." I opened the door just a crack to step outside. I already had my coat on and my purse slung over my shoulder. I shoved the cardboard box into her hands, and she grabbed it on pure reflex, nearly dropping her own bag in the process. "What is this?" she asked, scowling. "Your things," I said casually. "And I won't be able to make breakfast today. I've got errands to run. The girls will have to eat upstairs." Harper and Chloe looked at me wide-eyed, but I gave them a discreet wink. They both offered tiny, knowing smiles back. "And what are we supposed to do?" Valerie snapped, clearly irritated. "I don't have anything ready." "I guess you'll just have to cook." Valerie After all, your mother would do it better, I said, adjusting my scarf. I didn't wait around for her comeback. I headed straight down the driveway, leaving my daughter-in-law standing on the porch, holding a box of junk, with the sudden reality of managing her own life smacking her right in the face. Something deep inside me took a full breath for the first time in years. My first errand of the morning was a straight shot to the bank. 5 years ago, when Nathan hit a rough patch financially, I opened a joint checking account just for groceries. I'd deposit a set amount every month, about $600, so Valerie could buy food for the kids without stressing. The rough patch ended, but the free ride didn't. Lately, I'd noticed that debit card was suddenly swiping for her high-end cosmetics, the pricey wine she liked, and gourmet organic food for her dog. I sat down with my banker, a nice guy who'd known me for years. I'd like to withdraw all the funds from the account ending in 402 and close it permanently, I told him calmly. I signed the paperwork, and in under 20 minutes, the financial faucet was shut off completely. Later that afternoon, I was out in the yard pruning the rose bushes when I heard Valerie's car door slam. Her heels clicked furiously down the side walkway into my garden. She came charging in, face beet red, holding the bank card in her hand. I was just humiliated at the checkout lane. She exploded, not even bothering with a hello. My card was declined in front of everyone. You need to call the bank, Joanne. They blocked the account. I clipped off another dead branch, let it drop into my basket, and finally looked up at her. It's not blocked. Valerie, it's closed. She froze, her jaw practically dropping. Closed. Why would you do something like that without telling me? Because you don't need it anymore, I replied, pulling off my gardening gloves. You and Nathan both have full-time incomes. Harper and Chloe are older now. You don't need grandma subsidizing your grocery runs anymore. It's high time you handle your own finances. Nathan is going to hear about this, she threatened, her eyes narrowing. It's unbelievable how petty you're being over one little comment about dinner. It's not petty, I said, offering a tight smile. It's clarity. My money is my money. If you need groceries, pay for them yourself. Valerie spun around and stomped up the stairs. I knew there'd be a massive argument up there tonight. As for me, I went into my kitchen, brewed a cup of tea, and sat down to read in total. Beautiful silence. Peace and quiet was starting to feel like a luxury I could get used to very quickly. Sure enough, Nathan came downstairs that night. He had that exhausted, slumped shoulder look he always pulled out when he wanted me to feel sorry for him and cave in. He slumped onto my living room sofa and let out a heavy sigh. Mom, Valerie is super upset. She says you cut off the grocery money and locked her out this morning. You can't just fly off the handle over nothing. You know how she is. She just blurts things out sometimes. I looked at him from my armchair. My son had gotten so used to me absorbing his wife's disrespect that, to him, my reaction was the problem, not her insult. I'm not flying off the handle, Nathan. I'm just adjusting how we live, I explained, my voice perfectly level. You guys have lived upstairs rent-free for over a decade. I've helped with groceries and provided free childcare so you could save up for a house. Have you saved anything? Nathan looked away, staring hard at the coffee table. Things are expensive right now. Mom. They are, I agreed, which is exactly why I need to manage my own expenses. Starting today, my home is no longer an extension of yours. I'm not the maid. I'm not an ATM. And I'm not a 24-hour diner. You're punishing us, he whined, rubbing his face. I'm taking my life back. And I highly suggest you start taking control of yours. Nathan stood up, clearly frustrated that there was no yelling, no drama, and no tears he could use to write me off as crazy. He walked out without even saying goodnight. The next day, I made another practical decision. I called a locksmith. For years, Valerie had a spare key to my front door. She just let herself in at all hours sometimes to rummage through my fridge. Other times, to dump the sleeping kids on my couch when they came home late from a party. It took the locksmith half an hour to swap out the deadbolt. I paid him, slipped my shiny new keys into my pocket, and looked at the door with total satisfaction. This wasn't a declaration of war. It was just a gentle reminder that this house had an owner, and the owner demanded respect. From now on, if they wanted to come in, they'd have to ring the doorbell. The first attempt to barge in happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the living room knitting and listening to a podcast. I heard Valerie's footsteps coming down, followed by the metallic scratching of her key sliding into the lock. She jiggled it. The key wouldn't turn. I peeked out the window and saw her trying to shoulder the door open, muttering in frustration. Finally, she laid on the doorbell. I took my sweet time. I finished my row of stitches, set my needles on the coffee table, and went to open it. "My key isn't working," she blurted out the second she saw me, waving her keychain in my face. "I think the lock is jammed." "It's not jammed," I replied, leaning comfortably against the door frame. "I changed it." Valerie blinked, her brain short-circuiting as she processed the information. "Well, can you give me the new spare I need to bring down some sheets to wash in your machine?" "There aren't going to be any spares, Valerie," I said calmly. "And the washer upstairs works perfectly fine. You just need to clean the lint trap. A plumber confirmed it yesterday when I had him take a look at it." Her face morphed from annoyed to purely indignant. "Are you banning me from your house?" "I'm telling you that this is my house," I corrected her. "If I invite you, you're welcome here. If you need a favor, you ask, but you can't treat my home like your personal storage unit anymore." She wanted a fight. She opened her mouth to launch into one of her classic monologues about how I was tearing the family apart. But I cut her off. "Did you need anything else? Or did you just come down about the washing machine?" She pressed her lips into a thin white line, spun around, and stormed back upstairs. For the next 2 weeks, Nathan and Valerie tried to give me the silent treatment. They honestly thought that by icing me out, I'd get lonely and come begging for their company. What they didn't realize was that my own solitude was 1,000 times better than their toxic presence. I used those days to grab lunch with friends, read, and actually relax. The only ones who couldn't handle the distance were Harper and Chloe. Almost every afternoon, they'd timidly ring my doorbell to say hi. I welcomed them with freshly baked cookies and the exact same love I'd always shown them, proving that my issue was never with them. By the end of the month, the silence from upstairs broke out of sheer necessity. Nathan knocked on my door on a Tuesday evening. Valerie was right behind him, arms crossed and sporting a tight, forced smile that looked like it physically pained her. "Mom, we need to talk to you," Nathan said, using that buttery, compromising tone he reserved for when he wanted a favor. I let them into the living room. "I'm listening," I replied, gesturing for them to sit, though I remained standing. "Valerie and I have a corporate retreat this weekend," my son explained, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's a huge networking opportunity for her. We're heading out Friday morning and won't be back until Sunday night. We need the girls to stay down here with you." It wasn't a question. It was an order wrapped in a bow. The old me would have said yes in a heartbeat, dropping everything to accommodate their lives. "I'm sorry, but I won't be available this weekend," I answered matter-of-factly. Valerie's fake smile vanished instantly. "What do you mean you aren't available? You're their grandmother. What plans could you possibly have that are more important than that?" "I'm taking a trip down to the coast with my book club," I told them. It was the truth. We had planned it months ago, and though I'd briefly considered backing out, I was now dead set on going. The bus leaves first thing Friday morning. Nathan jumped up, panicking. Mom, we can't cancel this trip. The hotel is non-refundable. You have to do us this favor. I am their grandmother. Nathan, I stated, looking him dead in the eye. I am not your free, on-call babysitter. You knew about this trip for a while and you never bothered to ask me. You'll just have to hire someone to watch them or take them with you. You're doing this on purpose, Valerie shrieked, totally losing it. Ever since that dinner with the girls, you've been a nightmare. You're actively trying to ruin our lives. Valerie, I interrupted, lowering my voice so she'd sound even more unhinged in contrast. Your lack of planning does not constitute an emergency on my part. This conversation is over. Have a good night. I opened the front door and waited. They knew I wasn't going to budge. They walked out in silence, but the glare Valerie shot me promised absolute war. The next morning, I didn't see the girls. Nathan took them to school early, and that afternoon, Valerie's mother dropped them off. Clearly, they'd scrambled to find a backup sitter. Good for them. I went on my trip to the shore and had 3 absolutely glorious days, breathing in the ocean air and laughing over wine with my friends, miles away from the tension of my own house. I came home Sunday evening feeling completely recharged, but the peace was short-lived. On Monday, while I was watering the potted ferns on the porch, Valerie marched down the stairs holding a small cardboard box. Nathan trailed behind her, looking miserable. We need to talk, she announced, stopping a few feet away from me. She was incredibly dramatic about it, like she was performing a monologue on stage. I set the watering can down and crossed my arms. I'm listening. We can't keep living like this, Valerie declared. You treat us like strangers. You don't support us. Nathan and I have decided that if you don't change your attitude and go back to the way things were, we're done. We're moving out of the apartment. It was the ultimate ultimatum. She fully expected me to turn pale, to beg them to stay, to promise I'd make them breakfast every day and open my wallet just to keep them close. It was her trump card, weaponizing my fear of loneliness and using my access to my grandkids as a bargaining chip. I stared right at her, not blinking once. Then I looked at my son. Are you on board with this, Nathan? I asked. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom, it's just, things are really tense. We need you to cooperate more. I nodded slowly. I walked over to the patio table, picked up my phone, and checked the calendar. I think that's a very mature decision on your part, I said. My total calm completely derailed them. You've lived here for 13 years without paying a dime in rent. It really is time for you to have your own space and make your own rules. Today is the 10th. You have until the 30th of this month to clear your things out and hand over the keys. I expect the apartment left clean. Valerie's eyes bugged out of her head. Nathan took a step forward, completely panicked. Mom, wait. We didn't mean we were moving out right now, he stammered. You gave your notice, I replied firmly. You better start packing. The next 20 days were a brutal reality check for my son and daughter-in-law. They had thrown out the moving threat assuming I would fold. But the second they actually had to look at rental listings in the city, pure panic set in. Without my monthly cash flow, without the free meals, and facing a housing market that demanded first, last, and a security deposit. The comfortable little bubble they'd been living in completely popped. There were a few subtle attempts to backpedal. One afternoon, Nathan came down to suggest that maybe they had rushed things, that moving would be too hard on the girls, and they'd have to switch schools. They don't have to switch schools if you rent something in this zip code, I told him, sweeping the back patio. And the girls will always have a place here whenever they want to visit. I didn't leave them a single inch of wiggle room. They had tried to manipulate me, And now they had to eat the consequences of their own bluff. On the last weekend of the month, the U-Haul pulled up. It was a chaotic mess. Valerie was barking orders at the movers, while Nathan was sweating through his shirt carrying furniture. I stayed downstairs, watching through the window with a fresh cup of coffee in hand. I didn't feel sorry for them. I just felt a profound sense of relief. Mid-afternoon, Harper and Chloe came down to say goodbye. I hugged them tight. "Grandma, are you going to be lonely?" Chloe asked, looking worried. "I'm going to be very peaceful, sweetheart," I reassured her, brushing her hair back. "And you guys can come see me whenever you want. My door is always open for you two." "I'm so sorry about the dinner," Harper mumbled, clearly remembering the night that sparked it all. I gently lifted her chin. "That dinner was absolutely delicious. Harper, never let anyone, not even your mother, make you second-guess your hard work." "I am so unbelievably proud of you." I watched them climb into their dad's SUV. Nathan walked over to me before getting in the driver's seat. He handed over the keys to the upstairs unit, refusing to make eye contact. "Bye, Mom," he mumbled. "Well, goodbye, Nathan. Time to grow up," I replied, taking the key ring. The engine started and they drove off. The silence that settled over the property was absolute heaven. The next day, I went upstairs to inspect the unit. It was exactly what I expected: scuffed walls and dirty floors. I didn't get mad or complain. I just hired some painters. And in less than a week, I rented the place out to a quiet, older couple who paid their rent right on time. That extra income gave me a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I bought the patio furniture I'd been eyeing forever and signed up for a French pastry class. Meanwhile, the harsh reality of paying market rent and full utilities finally hit my son. Valerie had to figure out how to actually manage a household and a budget, something she hadn't done in 13 years. The girls started visiting me on the weekends. Nathan would drop them off on Saturdays and pick them up on Sundays. Those visits were different now. There was no screaming from the floor above, no last-minute demands. It was just us, baking treats and taking walks through the park. Paradoxically, by setting hard boundaries and kicking my son's family out of my house, I had actually gotten my granddaughters back. Now, I got to enjoy them without their mother's dark cloud ruining every single moment. 6 months later, things had finally settled into a healthy, new normal. One Sunday morning, Harper and Chloe were in my kitchen, their aprons covered in flour, laughing their heads off as we baked the croissants I'd learned to make in my pastry class. The doorbell rang. I went to open it. And to my surprise, it wasn't just Nathan. Valerie was standing right next to him. She looked exhausted, and that arrogant swagger she used to carry was completely gone. She hovered on the doorstep, not daring to step inside. She knew the rules had changed. "It smells amazing in there," Valerie commented, looking incredibly awkward. "The girls made croissants," I replied, standing my ground in the doorway. Chloe ran over to hand a little pastry box to her dad. Valerie peeked past me into the house and out toward the freshly landscaped garden. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she calculated everything she had lost. "Can we come in for a bit?" she asked, dropping her guard entirely. "Not today." "Valerie," I said, with a polite but firm smile. "The girls are packed up, and I have plans for the afternoon. Enjoy the croissants." Nathan nodded immediately, understanding the boundary, and respectfully said his goodbyes. Valerie stayed totally silent, confirming that she finally understood her place. I shut my door, heard the deadbolt click, and walked back into my bright, flour-dusted kitchen. I didn't need explosive drama or petty revenge to get my life back. I just needed the courage to close a door so peace could walk in.